why we were talking about tinge, diba? I think it's a reflective as well of the purchase. That's why it's a justice and it's a rights issue, because why are people buying small sachets of shampoo? Because they can't afford to buy large scale or wholesale products, which might be in more environment friendly or easier to dispose of containers. Diba?
Or they're not given choices like it could be a dispenser,
Mm-mm.
right? Before, I think maybe a lot of the students weren't born yet during that time, but in the marketplaces, you could see toyo suka being sold in dispensers. There was a time when systems were like that. So you go back there with your reusable container. Now they're in sachets too.
Or even before, diba, milk bottles were actually still in vogue, no? Diba, you bring the milk bottle to the plant, and then they give you, if you don't have a bottle, you pay a deposit for the bottle. So you keep returning. It's a relatively environment friendly way of engaging trade, diba?
Yeah, but this whole disposable culture, which is, you're right, it's not likas for Filipinos. It's a Western model of disposability. When that came along, everything became packaged in single-use plastic bottles and so on. Yeah, but you're right about. I just want to go back to what you said earlier about the Filipino propensity to keep stuff. Yeah.
Recycle as much as possible. Diba?
Yeah,
Pass it on to the next generation.
We have those systems, diba? In early morning, you have your botejario going around the neighborhoods to get recyclables,
scrap materials which can be
actually, in societies that are less industrialized, I would say, the economy is more circular, where we think more about reusing things rather than throwing them away.
Which is why I think you mentioned a very important point, because while the consumer might be the one to at the end point throw away these particular waste, these waste materials, it's actually the companies who are producing these things, and they actually have the agency to choose which materials or how to distribute things, which
exactly.
which is why I'm going to ask, which leads me to my next question, because you mentioned single-use plastic and later on how it influenced Pinoy culture, because tinge culture is actually revolves around single-use plastics, diba? Small sachets, and but there's this movement of, but I think that's the point. Why is it the consumer? It's the one who's being asked to pay for it. For example, if you go to the supermarket, diba, they offer you the use of plastic or they're gonna give you plastic. You have to buy the plastic bag for 2 pesos. But at the end point, if you think about it, you're not giving for free reusable materials to bring for your groceries. It's as if things are being passed around, and it's not the companies who are paying for it. It's the consumer and taxes as well. Given that, is there sort of like a change in this culture? Because you mentioned plastic. There's, of course, even in Manila, there's this attempt to reduce plastic, the 2 peso thing. Are we really moving towards a society where we can eliminate plastic use? Or even on the local level man lang, are we really moving towards a plastic-free society?
I think there are little patches of hope for a plastic-free society. Little right now, but growing, I hope, yeah. So there are movements. We work with a lot of groups like Mother Earth Foundation, Eco Waste Coalition. They work in communities where they spread the word about zero waste way of managing resources and reducing reliance on plastic. And then we have the LGUs that have instituted regulations. Right now, as a coalition with other environmental networks, we're asking for those regulations for the national government to have a national regulation. Because what's happening is Siquijor, for example, or San Fernando City would have a regulation against single-use plastics, pero their neighboring cities don't have that regulation.
That's my point.
Right?
Parang you might want to do it in one area, but it leads to a greater consumption of plastic in your surrounding area.
Yeah.
So how do we engage that kind of scenario? Even yung ganon.
Yeah. So the groups that we're working with, they're working at the grassroots level to really enforce segregation at source. So this is segregation at source is actually mandated by law. Pero but a lot of LGUs, local government units, cannot enforce it. So they can't tell people to segregate at the house. So once you segregate at source, it will be easier to compost the compostable waste, biodegradables. It's easier to recycle plastic, paper, and it's easier to see the amount of plastics that you're consuming, and have a plan about how to minimize it in the future. So you need that baseline na, barangay X, this is how much you're consuming. Let's do some regulations to lower the consumption of single-use plastic. So that's where your regulations come in, like ban on plastic straws, cutlery, ban on shopping bags, or regulations on shopping bags, etc. And promoting reusable, not disposable, reusable alternatives. So that's our long-term plan for those projects. Now we're hoping that the government will adopt it, and also that we stick by the law. The Solid Waste Management Act, Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, or Republic Act 9003, is actually a very, very, very beautiful law. Yeah. And it's if it is enforced properly, I think the Philippines will be on its way to become a zero waste society. Yeah.
Because we were talking about grassroots as well. No, it's as if, on one hand you have the issue. You were talking about making fossil fuel companies accountable, and then we were talking also about having companies manage their single-use plastic usage at the source, not at towards the end, where it's the consumer who has to worry about it. No? They should be the ones moving towards it. No? And then you mentioned grassroots. No? So there's a lot of things going on. No? But I think what I'm getting from you is that it's not just individual action that's necessary, but rather collective action. No? Can you talk about it more? Because that's what I'm getting at. No? So you can't have just one person making the fossil fuel companies accountable. You can't have just one person asking these companies to change, or you can't have just one person. For example, I think it's in India where they, instead of using plastic spoons, they're using bread, or 'di ba, parang spoons made from bread, where after consuming everything you can eat the bread afterwards. No? So these are things that don't seem to fit the model na it's the individual who has to act, no, or sole responsibility. It should be a community. No? Can you talk more about it?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's very, very true. There are things that an individual can do to live more sustainably, but beyond that, I think as a response to to the need for environmental justice, the need for climate justice as a bigger scale, collective action is needed. So what does collective action mean? Collective action is, I would say joining a protest. That is collective action, and that is very powerful. So if you look at the climate strikes that are happening right now worldwide, it's like 1 million children around the globe rallying to get their governments to raise their ambition for mitigating climate change. Now that is, I think the climate strikes are unprecedented in terms of action by very young students. It is very powerful because they're really sitting on the table with government leaders like Greta, the Swedish student, 15-year-old, who originated the climate strikes. So that's one type of collective action. Another collective action would be communities creating that model for sustainability. So why is collective action important? A lot of the times, when you speak with industry or business, they would tell you that, for example, for the plastic problem, parang it's the fault of consumers. It's your fault. So one thing you could do to change as an individual is pick up your trash and put it in the
Correct,
trash
correct.
can, right? Or clean the beach
Mm.
and help. But that is, I think, and for fossil fuel companies, it's, you know, you
Conserve
should,
energy.
yeah, conserve energy. Change your light bulb to LED bulbs and stuff.
Consume more.
Yeah. But you could do all these individual things, and it's great if you do. But in affecting systemic change, it's really collective action that can make it happen. I'm not telling people not to do individual choices. This is very good. It's very, what do you say? I think it's very conscience driven. You're realizing that you do have a role also. Yeah. But doing collective action is, I think, that answer to the call to justice. Yeah. Joining other groups in pushing for systemic change, yeah, lasting change, because the change that we need right now, like the IPCC said when you asked me about the state of the global environment, it's change that is drastic. We need drastic change. We need unprecedented change. This needs to come from governments and corporations, and I think citizens are should be, should have the moral. I mean, there is a moral
Or maybe
call
driven
for
by
you.
self-interest man lang, self-preservation.
Oh yeah. There's a moral call for you to push them to do the right thing, and we could do that through collective actions. In Greenpeace, we do protests. We do creative protests in to show the role of corporations and to ask them to change. Yeah.
Thank you. Do you think boycotts though? I think it's a very popular form of protest nowadays, no? To engage in a boycott of products from companies who engage in very unethical practices, no? Is it still effective? I'm just wondering because, if we if we would do a boycott of nearly every company that would be polluting or that would be contributing to pollution, to emissions, we might not be consuming anything. Parang ganon, no? So, so although there's this interesting, I think there's a town somewhere, I forgot the province, no, where they have this zero plastic day where you have to consume everything na from indigenous recyclable or this, biodegradable materials. Pero nga, no, can we still do, because the boycott movement, whether we like it or not, throughout history, it's been a very powerful and effective movement. But given this very consumerist, very widespread, no, it's like you can't find a company that's not using plastic anymore, no.
Yeah.
But can we still do it, ba, given the pressed economic and social conditions?
I don't know. Yeah. Our protest actions, even for our coalitions like Break Free from Plastic, we actually don't call for boycotts, mass boycotts. We rely on the individual to, make that choice whether they want to buy a product or not. Because you're right, a lot of the products that we need, our basic necessities, are all wrapped in plastic. Yeah. So maybe what's needed is more than a boycott. It's really getting on the table with these companies, getting on the table with government. We need to what do you call it? We need to we need to assert our agency as citizens in a world to who are hoping for a better world, better businesses, etc. And do that. Be in a position where we can force them or drive them to change their practices. It could be a boycott, but it will only work if it's a mass boycott. Yeah. And right now, with society very divided, very big, etc. There are instances where it might not be the most effective way. Yeah. So for us, it's really building movements that look at not just personal acts of sustainability, etc., but it's movements, for example, in cities where people band together and work towards a common goal, whether it be promoting green spaces, etc., or doing zero waste. The zero waste movement is really getting big right now. So it's, I think, movements like that which will be the key. Yeah.
But take note, you're talking about very powerful entities here, no? So you're talking about industrialized nations, then later on big companies, and then governments, no? Are there threats, given that these are very powerful entities that have very specific agendas, very specific interests that they might want to protect, no? Isn't being an environmental activist a very hazardous are there threats not to being part of this attempt to save not just human society but also the planet, no?
Yeah, very big threats. I think so. I forgot what year it is, but the Philippines was recently number 2 as the most unsafe place for environmental activists. So some years back, community leader against coal plants was killed, assassinated, and then we have the environmental lawyers, environmental commentators, etc., on radio, media people being killed also. So it's it's a dangerous time to be an environmental activist, I would say. Especially, so that's one of the threats. The other threat is also the shrinking civil society space that we have right now, the shrinking democratic space, not just in the Philippines, but in a lot of places around the world. And that leads me back to what we were talking about collective action. So unless we band together, collect and do collective action, work together, not just on environmental issues, but rights issues for people. We need to reclaim that space to assert our rights, to enjoy our rights. Yeah. That was a depressing question. Yeah. But you're right.
It's okay. So I understand that because democratic space has always been an issue naman. And it's not just about environmental activism, the way it goes through a long way, or cuts through a lot of sectors as well. But which leads me back to, because you were talking about now activism or participation in particular, no? But we're talking about the need not just for those in power, but those who live in the margins to participate in this action, no? How can we encourage them to participate more when in fact, whether we like it or not, no, from an initial point of view, they're the ones who have most to sacrifice, no? Because you're asking them to, because remember, the people who we need, or the organizations, the institutions that we need to be asking for accountability from, no, they can withstand, no, such actions. But if we're asking people from the margins to move or to act towards change, no, they will be asked, or they have to sacrifice certain things, no?
Yeah, that's right. But they're the most when woke. They are very, very powerful. I'll tell you this story about. I used to work for Anti-Incineration Alliance, working in the Asia Pacific, and we were going to have a conference with communities in Bangkok, working against incinerators. And I asked the organizer, is it okay for them to go there and if there is media there, they will be reported, or if we have that session with them on how to organize against incinerator facilities and so on that the government is promoting, will their lives be in danger? And they said that the community activists said, our lives are already in danger. We have nothing to lose. And this is really, it's, they're at the margins, but this will push them more into the margins. So they really are, they're the most, they are very conscious that even though they have nothing to lose, they have to fight for it. So you see this in when there are big projects that are environmentally sensitive, mining
Mining
projects,
became a very big issue.
yeah,
No?
or coal plant projects and so on. The citizens living in the periphery, we think that they're disempowered, but actually they're just looking for a platform where they can assert their agency, they can assert their rights, they can be active and participate in ensuring that this development does not push through if it endangers their livelihoods.
Which is very important because we're not talking about platforms. No,
Yeah.
it's as based on what I'm getting from you is that it's not just about asking those who have a stake in this to act, but also to provide them a platform where they can express themselves. No? How do you think, especially since in this age, in this era of technology, of social media, no, especially and since it's the youth, no, who are very adept, no, at adapting, no, well, particular classes of the youth, no, of course those who have access to technology, no, but what do you think is how can the youth, no, present a platform or move towards building a platform where the impoverished, where the marginalized, where the disempowered, those who are victims, no, how can the youth act towards empowering everyone towards moving towards climate justice? No? What would be their role? No?
Yeah. I think the youth today, because of all this technology, are a lot more woke than the
That's a common term talaga.
than the youth in the past. I think knowing about the issue and knowing who is responsible for the issue and what can be done about the issue, that's a first step. The youth today, I think, have a lot of access to information, more than we did
Because we
when
relied
we were
on
younger. Yeah,
long time ago, we just relied on
with
newspapers. No?
yeah, exactly.
Scrapbooks and scraps of paper that they put into a book and then you can look into.
Or
No?
mimeographed,
Mimeographs, oo.
brochures and stuff. And now, information is at their fingertips. And I think that that is the first step for them to do that research, to listen to what is happening in society, and to consciously take part in any solution that they can find. For example, volunteering, okay, or working to spread awareness, etc., or being active in their communities. Yeah, so that's one step. Maybe taking that further, I'd really like to encourage youth activism. Yeah, activism, as the word, has a bad rap, but activism merely means that we are participating as citizens in the conversations, the dialogues that are happening in our society, and being active members in society. So I think that for youth today, that sort of activism, we need it. Yeah.
Perhaps you can talk. Perhaps you can show. Perhaps tell us about some projects that Greenpeace is doing that maybe you can invite some of the students to.
Sure,
Yeah.
I'd love to. Yeah. Greenpeace right now is as an organization, we're collaborating with other environmental and climate organizations with the climate strikes, the youth climate strikes. And non-youth. It's not just for youth.
It's not just for young people.
The climate strikes is people going out on the streets to assert their rights as citizens of the world and citizens of a country, to call on their governments and for corporations to make big unprecedented cuts in emissions. That's happening globally from September 20 to 27 this year, and it will happen yearly. So if youth don't get to participate this year, they could participate next year. But this year, a lot of groups already in the Philippines are participating. If you're not participating yet, just look for climate strikes. Just Google climate strikes, yeah. And you will end up in a web page where the climate strikes movement all over the world are being tracked. You can download the kit on how you could start your own climate strike wherever you are. So I think that when we do the climate strikes here and get 1 million people in the streets asking for climate justice, that will be a turning point. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leah. So, just to conclude things, no, just wrap things up. Maybe what we should take away from this discussion is that the protection of the environment is not just from an individual level, but actually a social action or a community action. And it's not just about, or while it involves the preservation of the environment in terms of utility, because we need the environment, it's also a matter of social justice. It's a matter of of humans coexisting, no? Not just with each other, but also with the world they live in, so that we can sustain each other for the foreseeable future. Again, thank you very much, Leah, for accommodating us today, and thank you very much for watching this session of the Public Intellectual Lecture Series.